Hi everyone, we're here again with another film, and in this case it's a collective that made this film. So I'm really excited to talk about the collective, to talk to them about the film, and to share this with everyone. Would like you guys to introduce yourselves.
My name is Amanda.
I am Ángeles.
And I'm Cesar.
And we are Colectivo Somoslacélula.
Yeah, and if you can tell us a little bit about Somoslacélula, how you guys came together, what do you guys do, who is in the collective?
Okay, so the collective is the three of us, and this started 2 years ago. We have been doing sanctuary work in New York City for over 3 years, working with migrant communities. We volunteer as interpreters in a process clinic, and we do accompaniments to Federal Plaza and Barrick Street, people who are facing deportation. So the first video that we did was a video explaining how the immigration system works, kind of underground, because you don't see that in New York City. You think that you're living in a sanctuary city, but families are being separated every day. And so we did a video kind of to show this contradiction, right? Like you think you're living in this city that is super diverse and multicultural, and at the same time, this is happening in the same city. So that was the first video.
Yeah, and so also a little bit of background. We, with Angeles, we're both professors at the public university here in Angeles in New York City. I'm in New York State.
Mm-hmm.
Amanda works at the Spirit Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were, for kind of creating this video work that we're doing, we were thinking on how, because we write a lot, but we were thinking what kind of other media we can use to talk about more political stuff and our work kind of as activists. And as we were always very close to video, we work on images and visual culture, so we started doing videos.
Nice. And something that I think that people would like to know is the difference between making work on your own. There are most of the filmmakers in the screening are single filmmakers, and they do their own work, individuals that do their own work. How does it feel to make work together, and how you realize, okay, we want to be a collective and we want to make films together?
Sure, for me, it's been a really interesting process. I think kind of naturally one figures out their strengths. So in the sense of a number of the videos feature all three of our voices. Naturally, I feel that that's my strength. I like participating in that aspect. And I just think it works really naturally, kind of the ideas, the way in which
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think also politically it's a way to, you can, for instance, talking about La Revuelta and what happened in Chile, you can be, of course, you're far away, right? Like we were here,
Mm-hmm.
and so you can participate, or you can be a spectator, like you're reading news, you're learning what is happening, but making videos is also a way of being part of what is going on, right? Like you're reacting in a different way. You're not commenting, but you're reflecting, and you're trying to participate in a different way. And also, I think it's important for us that none of us is a filmmaker by, I don't know, we didn't study film, and we have been learning in the process. So the editing, everything is collective. It takes a lot of time. Cesar, of course, has more experience, with music and sound editing and all of that. But also, it's a way of trying to practice this idea that we have, that you don't need to be an expert in something to be able to do something, right? Like the doing is really important. Mm-hmm. So that's why also I think the videos feel very kind of homemade, but I like that aesthetic too. It's very, because it's like the best that we can do with the medium, with the media that we have, the means we have.
Yeah, and also the part of the collective is also part. So we've been thinking about kind of inexpert practices, unexpert practices.
Yeah.
Like what would it mean to intervene in some political space or some even academic space without being an expert? I think that's more common in the real world than anyone imagines. Like we relied a lot on expertise, but actually most of the great things that are happening on the streets in real politics today are done by people who sometimes have never done this before, that they had to start doing things because those were the things that you had to do. So to do that, like really, I think properly, you need to do it in a collective way.
I think you bring up a lot of really interesting points that relate to the screening. One of them is that the screening is also, for me, always felt like a collective voice. And the idea to get as many films as I could, and this was the reason why the screening is 95, 97 minutes and not more, is because Anthology was giving me a limit. Because originally I wanted it to be, if I could be 5 hours, you know what I mean? Because there was so much material out there. This idea of it being a collective voice and gathering as many people as I could, as many films as I could. And the way you see it, when you see the screening from beginning to end, it feels like just a one single thing, one single journey made out of all these voices. So the fact that you're saying that about your collective is just, you know, it touches on to the screening as well. And then this amateur thing, right? Like this, not an expert, not being an expert, not being, you know, not having the school of film on you to create work. A lot of the work that came from Chile and from different calls were from people that are maybe not filmmakers per se, or like don't have the experience, younger people who were just gathering footage, or people who are into visual arts but maybe never imagined that that was their medium, and now they're doing more and more work because of the revolt and because of what happened. The need to express yourself through something, you know, in this case through something visual, to be able to show what's going on. So yeah, so those are points that are really interesting that you guys brought up, because I feel like it's also part of the whole screening. I would love to know something that you also mentioned earlier, is this the being away, right, for something so important, that, you know, it's something that it's what motivated me to create this screening, is the fact that I was here when everything happened in Chile. What was your experience when October 18 happened and people started to go out in the streets, but you were here? What was that experience?
We went to a demonstration outside of the MoMA. Right?
Yeah, we're participating in a different demonstration. You know, that night was like the new opening of the MoMA, like the new MoMA. So the gala, right? So we were participating with a group of, you know, like the sanctuary art group or something, that they have been, you know, denouncing all these like different people who are in directories at different museums who have also interest. For instance, in this case, there was one member of the directory of the board of I don't know if it's the board of trustees or the but who had, you know, stock in core civics, you know, like it's like the for-profit carceral system. So we actually we were able to enter the MoMA, some of us, and we dropped a banner, and there were other people were protesting outside.
Yeah, so, I was playing the bass drum.
So we were there.
It was a funa.
Yeah. So we're there for 3 hours.
Can you explain shortly what funa means?
Oh, yeah. So funa is an organized
crash party, like
crash to shame publicly, or to maybe not only shame someone publicly, but to bring public accountability for someone who has not been accountable in kind of regular justice system.
So this was a very fancy party, you know, all the guests were arriving and there were maybe 300 protesters outside, you know, making a lot of noise and informing people that they were entering.
But we're
but so the important thing is that while we were there, we were, you know, getting news like, oh, this is going on in, you know, in Santiago and in Chile, and the thing is that you only see images, right? Like you see what the media are showing. So we just saw fire and this very like destructive, you know, destruction going on, and you get very little narrative at the beginning, like, or what is happening. So then we learn more, I think, the next day, right?
Yeah, no, but so of course I knew that what was going on at, you know, the subway and the students, but as many people, I think I didn't think that this would escalate as what happened. So I did know, and I remember after MoMA we went somewhere and we listened to the Piñera, the president, saying that he was declaring, you know, the emergency state, and that he would, you know, release the military into the streets. That's when it really hit us. That it was like you know,
again.
The response from the government was the thing that made you realize that this was. You know,
can you talk to us about the film Para que Nunca Más, and how did this film happen? When did you guys make it? And how your voices joined in as a collective to create this piece?
It was a long process because this started as a trilogy that never came through. So Para que Nunca Más was the third part of a longer, you know, reflection through images about like this long arc, you know, like the 30 years. But it was I mean, the first two parts, I mean, we didn't show them.
It was actually the middle part.
This was the middle part? Yes. Oh, yeah. This was the middle part. So the first part was just images like from the dictatorship, you know, like media, consumerism and stuff, and repression. And then there were some parallels between, because we have a specific, you know, footage from repression during the dictatorship, and then some footage from what was happening those days. And it was like a parallel, but it didn't work. So, and only this middle part had the text, right? Like written by this writer, Catalina Infante. It was an opinion piece that she published in a newspaper in Santiago that same week, talking about like what, you know, we had all this history and all this, you know, like, and you know, like this reconciliation and this pact, and what was all that about, you know, like we're forgetting all of this. So that centerpiece, I mean, we showed the whole stuff to a couple of friends, and we got some feedback, and everyone said like, oh, the middle part is really powerful, the other two parts feel a little bit disconnected. So we ended up just, you know, working more on that I mean, what you're screening, you know, the Para que Nunca Más.
It usually happens with the trilogies that you either have the first one or the middle one.
Well,
it never comes to fruition.
An expert part, you know. So
yes, no, but it happens even like to everyone. I've talked to so many people about their work, and they're doing a trilogy, or they're doing like a 5-chapter thing, and it's always like 4, 2 missing. I don't know. I think it's just part of the how one creates, you know, like this idea that and something also that we talked with another filmmaker yesterday, how things aren't finished, how films sometimes, like the idea of the piece being finished is just a temporary placeholder, because it you know, this idea that the piece is always evolving, or that the piece is not finished, it's part of your whole you know, life project in a way. Cesar, sorry, I interrupted you.
No. And I just wanted to, before I forget, that because we were doing this, the first part was like the screen divided into 3, and like we had a lot of images. And so then the second part, we said like, okay, this text is really powerful, and it has a lot to do with all the images that we were, and so let's think about something like with more tranquility in the sense of like visual. So because we were working with all these other images, we had this image of you know, the folkloric group of the, how do you say this in English?
La cueca sol. Oh.
No, the family of the.
No, yeah, like the
aggregation of
relatives of the
detainees
disappeared.
Yes, and so this La Cueca Sola was a very, one of the most powerful, I think, kind of performances and political performances during the dictatorship. And it was so powerful because cueca, it's a national dance. It was actually made the national dance by the dictatorship. It wasn't the official dance before the dictatorship, and it was made national actually really like 1 year after this aggregation of women started doing this. So it was kind of a response. Even if it was unconscious, it was a kind of a political response from the, like, to reappropriate from the dance from the by the state. And this was a dance. It is a dance that is supposed to be dance in pairs, usually between a man and a woman. And these were women that would dance this alone. Kind of, well, and that was, I'm not gonna explain more, but that should so and when democracy came back, or they said that it was coming back, there was a big act in the National Stadium that was transmitted by national television in a chain, etc. And so at the very end of that act, these women came to the stage, the stadium, and while they were showing all the names of all the detained disappeared, they played the cueca, and the composer, who usually stayed with Gala Torres, who usually stayed with the guitar, she went and danced it, and that's, for me, has always been something like very powerful, and we thought that image would kind of, the text and that image, that only image, and just do something with it would be good.
Yeah, well, you again touched on very interesting points. One is like the heterosexual folklore in Chile that is so strong, and it's something that I dealt with when I was younger, knowing that I was queer and having to live this every Independence Day, have to go through this heterosexual world. But the having a single dancer dance this very heterosexual dance is so powerful. First, like that's the first layer of those images, like having just a single female dancer, also with the history that women carry also in Chile, and the history of women that lost a relative as well during dictatorship. But then there is something else that you do. I mean, those images on their own are really strong as a document, a historical document, as a performance as well. Like it's a powerful performance. So we could like analyze the performance itself. We could analyze the historical moment itself. Like already those two things are so powerful. Yet you do something even more. Like you go even further by doing this exercise, which is a very technical, you could say a very technical exercise of making the screen larger and larger. And and I want to know a little bit about that decision, because you talk about not being experts, yet you do act like you are, like you know images so well. How, what made you do that exercise? And because again, it's extremely powerful, and I think that exercise is what completes the piece with the text that is already powerful.
I mean, I remember that because as Cesar was describing before, you know, we had this first part with the 3 panels with a lot of images and very fast, and this was a more, you know, calm and subtle way of entering, because also we wanted the text to have prominence, or to have a dialogue between the text and this image. And also it's like a tiny memory, right? Or it's just like one person, imagine one person dancing this by herself in the National Stadium. That is this giant space, a space that was also, it was the first you know, like prison center and concentration camp, right? It was used as a concentration camp from September, October, November. Many people died there, people disappeared there, women were raped at that stadium. So, and at that same place, like almost 20 years later, you have these women dancing. So we wanted to convey that idea of like this little tiny, you know, and so at the beginning it's in the right corner, and it grows bigger and bigger, because it's like it's an event in itself, and it's a very strong memory. So visually, I think that conveys that. But also, even though we are not filmmakers and we're not experts in maybe doing film, we have been studying, and we work with images, right? We think through images. So we could have analyzed this archival footage, for instance, and write a very intelligent or maybe not that intelligent text. But this is another way of thinking through images, right? Like, yeah, I don't know.
No, it reminds me of other videos we've played with aspects of enlarging photographs slowly. So kind of like this Polric or kind of this drawing out of time in a weird way that I guess the medium of film allows for.
Yeah, and there's something really interesting about that exercise, because I've seen some of your newer stuff and watching it, and you're still working with that, but in this case with still images as well, not moving images anymore, but still images too. And I guess it's also a way to say, hey, sometimes we don't need that much in terms of content, and we don't need that many images. We can actually analyze this particular image and find so much within the frame. It's almost like, you know, the exercise of looking at a painting and kind of memorizing everything that's in the painting. Here, we're just watching this single action, and it becomes so powerful because you give us the opportunity to stay in the action and stay in that same frame and enlarge it, and, you know, bring us closer to it so that we can analyze it. So it becomes more and more intimate. So it is a powerful piece. And also within the program, for me, it's a very important piece, because it acts as a bridge from a historical point of view. The screening is organized chronologically, I would say, with events that are happening in Chile. So all the films that are gathered are organized in a chronological way, so that people can also have a sense of the history of the country, because we know that what happened October 2019 comes from a series of events and comes from such a historical luggage. So it's not a single event, and as many other things, many other revolts, many other protests, it doesn't just happen because of a single event. It carries all the history. So that's also, you know, why the piece is placed in where it is in the program, and how that piece really works as a bridge between, you know, something that it's a history that we carry as Chileans. So super interesting. And you're also very interested in what's going on here in the US, and also very active with the different demands that are happening. How did you guys how did you feel about the Black Lives Matter movement? And, you know, like, were you able to compare it somehow with what happened in Chile? How did you feel about what happened here in June?
Amanda, do you want to?
Oof. Wow. For my mind, I don't even know if we want to go there, but my mind is drawn to the conversation we had with a mutual friend where there was like a point of attempting to draw some sort of
the comparison.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it. Well, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we've been talking about this comparison a lot because it on the one, like very abstractly, on the one hand there are so many points of contact, and that's powerful. At the same time, it's like very dangerous to start doing like too many comparisons, like too easy comparisons, because it, you know, it comes from different places.
It was the Chile Despertó.
I think
it was the comparison of saying, like, can we say like the Chile Despertó? Can we say that like the U.S. has kind of woken up or something? And we found that very problematic to imagine kind of that same language being used in this context. So there's always been kind of a lived visceral knowledge and reality, and then but then there were
but then before I forget, then with that conversation I was thinking that actually Chile Despertó, although was like super like mobilizing, etc., is like a kind of a really bad like point of reference to the whole movement in Chile, because like it kind of assumes that people were sleeping silent, and that never happened. Like people were active all the time. So and that's what they were pointing out to me, that here Black people have been always woken, you know. So how can you say that they but Chile is the same. So the problem is the phrase, not the
because it's it was similar to that in I remember we had a panel, you know, late October, maybe early November, and Pedro Cayuquia was there at NYU. And so it was this idea, right? Like, it's not like Chile Despertó, like Chile Woke is maybe the Winca, you know, or, you know, white Chileans, but because Mapuche have always been awake, you know, they have always been repressed by police and by the state. So again, it's kind of the same parallel here. Maybe you could say that maybe white people awoke, you know, and now they're, you know, like really, police are really brutal and violent, you know, and for no reason, just by being racist. But I think that's the extent of the comparison.
No, but there's so the whole monument thing, for instance, which had been happening here longer, right? But then now it got kind of reignited with the whole rebellion. There was the writing too, which was like super powerful here in New York City. Like for 3 nights, there was like super powerful rioting, looting. And I think one of the comparisons that you can do is the analysis and the political use of rioting, because just like in Chile, here there is still like a very kind of the liberal media and analysis, which is like, we should, you know, condemn any looting, rioting, because that's not, you know, valid political speech. And then all the other kind of, you know, marching, peaceful marching, blah, 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 that's good. At the same time, everybody realized that without the looting, without the rioting, nothing's gonna happen. And that exact same thing, I think, happened in Chile. Everybody was very well aware that all the flames and all the destruction was kind of the most important igniting point for a real rebellion. Yeah.
And I think another point that it's not related to actually with the comparison between the United States and Chile, but here in the United States, you know, especially after all the repression that we saw in Oregon, you know, and I read so many posts of people saying like, I can't believe you have federal agents, you know, attacking and arresting citizens, you know, and it's like, it's horrible. But federal agents have been doing that for years to non-citizens. And why is that non-citizens can be arrested in that way? Why can't they be put into, you know, vans with no plates or by, you know, undercover cops, and that's okay? So making that defense, it's also very problematic, because you kind of reinforce the divide between there's some actions that are okay where they're performed into some bodies and not okay when they're performing into against other bodies, right? So in the borderlands, you have had federal agents, police, border patrol performing like the most violent acts against people for years. And there's been an outcry, of course, but now this was kind of like a new, something that was new in this country, and it's not new, right? So I think that's also worth mentioning.
Yeah, so everything really interesting, and worth to continue a conversation specifically about that. But yeah, I would like to know if you guys are working on new stuff. Well, I know that you've shown me a couple of things, but yeah, like if you can tell the audience, what are you working on right now?
We've been working with, or kind of witnessing and working a bit with a lot of, the same communities that we were working before, migrant communities in the Bronx, in Harlem. And these, so everybody, so these are like highly affected communities, like the Latino and Black communities in the Bronx, in East Harlem, are the death rates there are, compared to other zip codes in New York City, are crazy. But so these communities have been working a lot in mutual aid initiatives. So the three of us and other compas, we were working, doing a website in Spanish to give, so to show people that they have rights and their resources, etc., things like that. And so the last video we did was, we did it because we participated something in GAM, at GAM in Santiago, that wanted to talk to us about migration and our work with migration. And so kind of based on the mutual aid that we were looking here, and the mutual aid that has been done there in, Renca, La Victoria, Villa Francia, they have organized
soup kitchens
that soup kitchens it's called. Yeah. So ollas populares, no? So the same kind of that's another comparison. Like the virus attacked, or the death attacked the most vulnerable communities, of course, and those communities, like always, are the communities that are more organized, that create all these mutual aid things, because they already have these things, And so the last video, we talked about citizenship.
And also because in Chile, like last week, they passed this new migration law. So it was related to that also. It's like a very anti-immigrant, anti-migrant law. It's like Chile for Chileans. The video was made before, but it's about this discussion too, like racism and xenophobia in Chile. So it's a reflection on who belongs to where, and really like everyone belongs to where they live. I mean, that's the basic idea. Like you belong where you want to live, and you should be able to live with dignity and be happy wherever you want to live. So that's what Amanda was saying before, this work with fixed images, right? With still images, and trying to move these photographs, right? How can you create movement via film to reflect on these different ideas, using very, very few photographs. Yeah.
Something that I recently had a conversation with Francie Duran as well about this, how being abroad, right, being Chileans in this case, and being abroad in this case in New York, affects the work, and affects it kind of informs what you create as artists. I would love to know a little bit more about how your experiences living abroad, and but also staying connected to your homeland through your work.
Well, we should say that.
Yeah, in my case, I'm 100% gringa. So.
But it's the reverse movement, because you lived in Chile for 3 years. So she lived in Chile and came back, and we came here from Chile, I would say.
Yeah, no, I think you always have like that double, you know, I mean, in a way you belong to two places, and in the same way that you don't belong to either of those places, right? So whenever I left Chile when I was 23, I've been here most of my adult life. So I consider this city my home. But of course, in many ways, I don't belong to this country. I don't feel, you know, but when I come back to Chile also, I don't feel that I belong there, or at least I don't belong to the group where I grew up. I don't feel connected to that kind of discourse, and I have, you know, formed new relationships and friendships and collaborations with other people that I didn't know when I was living there. So I like to having that kind of, you're always looking things from afar, but at the same time from within. So I like having like the kind of that double perspective.
And of course, it gives you for me at least, it gives you like a very kind of material sense of kind of a gaze or a critical perspective that you cannot have while you're living there.
And also,
like,
especially I think in terms of how exceptional things are, right? Like when you live in Chile, and Chile has a very strong idea of how an exceptional country they are. Same with the US, you know, like this is like, it's very unique for so many reasons, that the discourse of exceptionalism in, you know, it's very strong both in the US and in Chile. So when you have the advantage of saying like, not really, you know, because you kind of see both and other countries as well. So you're starting to see like the recurrences and the repetitions, or the things that they continue, you know, things that are similar in different and in different countries and at different conjunctures. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, so interesting. So we have to come to an end, but I wanted to offer you one last thing that you would like to share or say about the film, or about being in the screening and the program, also inviting people to watch the films, to watch the program.
I would just like to say that you are going to be watching, films that maybe was created in response to something that happened in October. And now it feels like that was a long time ago, but things in Chile continue to be very, very, I mean, it's critical now. In Mapwhich, you know, in the south of Chile, you have more than 20 political prisoners who have been in prison, detained unjustly for months. There are over 20 political prisoners who continue being on a hunger strike, and the government doesn't want to talk to them. At the same time, you have, you know, the truck drivers and the truck owners doing strikes all across Chile, cutting the supply chain, and the government is trying to respond to their demands instead of listening to the demands of the people. There are many, many human rights violations every day. The police keep repressing people on the streets. Yesterday, they tear gas everyone at Plaza Dignidad. So what you are seeing, what you're watching in this film, it's a recurring problem and a crisis, really, and it's a crisis manufactured by the government.
So free all political prisoners.
Basically, Mapwhich,
Yeah.
And abolish police everywhere.
Yes. We're having a conversation with Flavi from one of the collectives that's also showing pieces in the program, and they were actually filming yesterday in Santiago, and so I got some of those images that you're talking about through them today. So yeah, so it continues. All of this is still happening in Chile. So yes, it is a screening that maybe was born from something very specific, but it's not. I mean, I think it's very clear in the screening how the history continues to be in a certain way, and how much there is a need for a change. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you so much for your work, and I look forward to seeing more of your work, and hopefully programming more of your stuff in the future.
Thank
So yeah.
Thank you for doing this. Really, it's really important.
Yes. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.